Hey people, so we're back with more of our painting techniques. So remember that we were working on our painting techniques that we're going to be using for our first project. This is what it looked like to start, and it said different areas of what we were doing. So blending, dry brush, wet on wet, sgraffito, sponge paint, stippling, and then blend for shadow. So we're going to refer back to this when we complete the next couple parts. So before we do any of the painting techniques, I want to work on this piece. So I'm looking at it, and I know I want a color mix already, but I want to show you what that looks like for me. So I'm going to move these out of the way. I'm going to pull up my paper plate. So my paper plate has all the colors. You guys have paint stations. And I want to talk to you about what the proper way to use a paper plate is. So you scoop the paint that you need, and then when you put these piles of the individual colors, you need to pull down from that color and mix. So that's the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to pull a little bit of color, then I'm going to pull a little bit of another color, and then I just start to mix it in. Okay, well that's too bright. I want it more yellow. So I add a little bit of yellow to it. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. I want a little bit more yellow, but now it's still really, really bright. So when it's really too bright and I'm not sure what exactly I want to add to it, that's when I add the complementary color. And I add just a tiny, tiny little bit. And we'd be like, Miss Martinelli, you ruined it. You added black, or you added red. You know, why would you do that? But once you have it all the way mixed in, it really tones down that color. So now I'm going to get this out of the way, and I can continue working on my wet on wet. So it says wet on wet color mixing. And wet on wet color mixing literally means that you're mixing directly on there. But luckily, this green's not for that inside color. So I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to take this. And remember, long brush strokes. Let the paintbrush do the work. There we go, just like that. Just like that. And notice how with each one of these, I slightly change the color. Now I'm going to wait to do that outline edge until after I have this part done. So I'm going to wash out my paintbrush, and I remember the colors that I used for over here, which were white, brown, and a little bit of yellow. I think I added a touch of purple too. So let's watch and see what that looks like. So what I'm going to do right now is I have a flat paintbrush. So watch and see how I do this. Take the corner, I stick it in for a little bit of brown. Take the other corner, stick it in for a little bit of yellow, or a little bit of white. Right there. I have two colors, but I didn't contaminate one with the other one. Okay, so that is, I'm ready to use right there. Okay, but that's too bright. So now I'm going to take that next color, and I'm going to paint directly on top of it. Still a little bit light. Okay, so I'm mixing right here on this paper, just like this. A little too light, so remember, if it's too bright and you don't know how to tone it down, that's when you add that complementary color. So for this point, since I lightened it up with yellow, I used the complementary color of purple to make it a little bit darker, and here I am letting the paintbrush do the work. Remember those long brush strokes, and then I can make it a little bit darker by adding a touch more purple right here on top. So again, you might be like, whoa, that's a lot of purple, but I'm going to mix it in as I go, and it will work out just fine. So here we go, mixing that in right there. Here we are, and then there it is, just like that. So now I can come back while my paint's still wet. Notice I'm working quickly, and I can show that edge where the skin is of the pear. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're trying to show most of it. You can come back, make a smoother line, and if I want to add a shadow, I'm going to add a touch of red to this. I'm going to make it a little bit darker right here on the bottom, because the sun can't get to it on the bottom. There we go. Got to be careful because I see a droplet of water on the edge of my paintbrush. I don't want to run down in a second. So there you go. I made that darker just by painting it a little bit. And now I'm going to do an edge right there to the edge of my hair, just like that. And now that I have most of this done, I can start to go back and add other details to make things darker, or to just literally add details. So I'm making a little bit of a shadow right there. I can use the dab technique, so I'm taking a little bit of brown. I'm going to add a little bit. First time I'm adding a touch of black to this. I could honestly add some purple here. I'll add some purple. In dab technique, I'm going to press straight down and then pull up. And there's my seed. Press straight down, pull up. There's my second seed. And I turn the paper so I make it easier for myself. Press down, pull up, press down, pull up. There's my seed. Maybe I want it a little bit darker. So maybe my color started to unmix. Just like that. There we go. I can add a couple more things there. I can darken just a couple areas up on the edge. There we go. If I want to make it thinner, do that with a little dot of water, just like that. All right, so my thing is starting to come together now. There we go. Okay, so now I've got to add those final painting techniques. So I've got to add the sgraffito, the dry brush, the sponge, and the stippling. So let's talk about that dry brush first. So dry brush means a super, super dry brush. It means make sure that the handle of your paintbrush is dry. It means make sure there's no water at all. Then I'm going to take a little touch of whatever color you want to use. I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow. And if you notice, here, I'll move this so you guys can see what I'm doing. With this, I took a little bit of yellow and I wiped it on the edge of this paper plate. And see how I have a full brush stroke right there? That means I had too much. So I literally need to wipe it off until I've got almost nothing going. Let it catch up. There you go. Just like that. Okay. Moving it back. And let's do some dry brush. So I'm going to arrange this so that I just have to pull with this dry brush. Just going to add a little bit of texture. I want a little bit more yellow than green this time. I can do it from the base right here. There we go. So that's my dry brush. Added a little bit of texture. Stippling is small, little controlled pokes. Now with stippling, it doesn't have to be in the whole area. So remember, with a lot of these painting techniques, you need a color underneath. So just like with dry brush, stippling is also one of those. So a lot of times pears have little dots on them, little brownish, purplish dots. So I'm mixing brown and purple together right now. And I'm doing small, controlled pokes to show some texture and to show some interest. So they can be, and by controlled, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a tight little clump, but it means that I'm deciding on purpose where I want them. Some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, some of them are more towards the top, but they're small controlled pokes to add some details and some textures. And I can even overlap multiple textures on top of each other. I'm just trying to think about what makes it look realistic. It's those small little details. I can even come in with a little bit of white and do a slight highlight with it. With those stipples. There we go. Alright. And then the last one we're going to do is sgraffito. Everybody loves sgraffito. Oh, and then sponge over there. I guess I like. So sgraffito. So remember how we painted this super dark up here? We're now going to make it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take green, straight up green, mix it with a touch of yellow, mixing it over here. And now I'm going to apply it pretty thick and very wet. Applying it down, right on top like that. And I'm going to flip my paintbrush over, and I'm going to carve directly into it to show that leaf. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Oop, I got a cleanup alarm going off. And again, I'm going to do this down here. So this base color has to be dry. Put that down, flip the paintbrush over, carve directly into it. So it's going to reveal that darker color. And then lastly, my last one, add a little bit more yellow for this go round. Right there on top. This is the layer that's going to be seen, so be a little bit neater with it than maybe you were in past ones. And then again, use the back of the paintbrush and scratch away right into it. If you want to add details later on from a small skinny paintbrush, you can come in after it's dry and you can add again that complementary color to change, and so you can actually see the differentiation between the two leaves if you didn't quite make it different enough color. So our last thing for this is our sponge paint. So I'm going to take my sponge. Remember, when you were sponge painting, you need to make sure first of all that your sponge is dry, that it's clean. So this one is not clean because it's on my finger when I use it. So I need to wash it out. I need to squeeze it out, and then I need to dry it on a paper towel, which is what I'm doing off screen. And I need to make sure all that water is out, because there's nothing worse than having a sponge that's dirty, ruins your whole picture as the last thing you do. Oh, notice that I also got paint directly up here. Watch. Dry finger, wipe it off. All good, no worries. Wipe. So I have my dry sponge. I'm ready to rock and roll. I take the paint. Remember, when you're sponge painting, you want to show the texture of the sponge. You do not want to show a perfect circle. So I'm going to take the colors that I want to use. I can use 2 colors at once if I want to, that's fine. And I just want to paint it directly onto that sponge. Just paint it just like that. So now that I have that painted, I actually painted a couple colors. I'm going to lightly tap down to show some texture. And with sponge, you don't have to do it everywhere, but it has to be large enough that we can at least tell where it is. And sponge is really good for showing like the mealiness of an apple. Doing it a little bit down here. You can combine painting techniques, do 2 in 1 area. Totally fine. Alright people, so these are our painting techniques. This is where we started. This is where you've ended. Use these techniques, apply them to your painting, and good luck.